Hi everyone, my name is Julian Ariano, and today I will be talking to you about critical thinking. But first, I would like to open up my presentation today by asking you all a question. Has there ever been a time in your life when you were presented with a challenge, a problem, or an obstacle that you felt you needed to think outside the box to come up with a solution? This could have been in work, at school, or even just in everyday life. Well, chances are you answered yes to this question because the fact is, more often than not, the problems that we face in day-to-day life won't have clear-cut solutions or black and white answers. And so a lot of the time we're forced to come up with a new solution or just to be creative and innovative and to come up with something that might not have existed before. There was a quote that really resonated with me for this presentation, and that quote goes like this: "Necessity is the mother of invention." This is true, and I really believe that critical thinking is present in this quote because it's through the process of critical thinking that new inventions can be created. And since there might not be anything like this new invention before it, we're forced to completely think outside the box to come up with a new solution. So I'm going to be talking to you about three main types of critical thinking today. And the first one that we're going to get into today is one that we've already been talking about, and that is thinking outside the box to solve problems. Well, a lot of the time, our work training isn't quite enough to prepare us for every single situation we'll face. And actually, sometimes we're going to face problems that you have not been trained for. And in these situations, you're going to have to actually undergo a process of critical thinking to either come up with a solution or possibly to even to realize that you need to reach out to your boss and ask for help. I used to work for an indoor trampoline park company, and I would travel all around and basically build indoor trampoline parks. And it would take about 2 weeks per project. And so what would happen is we would go out on the road and we would go from project to project. And so we would spend 2 weeks in a place and then we would move on to the next place. And there was one thing that just seemed like it was always a common theme on every job. There were probably a couple exclusions, but for the most part, every job was that there was always going to be some kind of problem that was not foreseen beforehand and that we would have to basically overcome and still build our indoor trampoline parks and still complete the job. These problems included concrete issues, electrical issues, or even sometimes I've been to a building that was completely flooded one time, and we were supposed to be laying out some chalk lines and it was just not working, so we had to come up with a solution for that. So that was actually one way that critical thinking was a big part of my life. So as much as you want to be able to solve problems, you don't want to rush into things. Of course, a lot of these problems do need a quick solution. So as important as it is to be able to think on your feet and to come up with a quick solution, you still always want to make sure that you're not making any brash choices and rushing into anything if you're not too sure. As I mentioned before, Sometimes part of the problem solving process is just realizing that you need help, and it's okay to ask for help. So here I've listed a couple methods of problem solving, and the first being to, simplify the problem. Take one step at a time, because a lot of the time when we're looking at an overall picture of a problem, it might seem overwhelming. But really, the most important thing is to figure out, how can I start to solve this problem? Another thing is to ask yourself, what would I do if I started from scratch? So maybe take a step back, maybe don't start from scratch. Sometimes you don't have that option, but at the same time, you want to be able to recognize, hey, like maybe I should just kind of retrace my steps and kind of see like what I would have done differently, and maybe go from there. Reevaluate, this is included there. And then also to take a step back and just look from a different perspective. Maybe just hear another coworker out, or basically, like I said, again, just ask for advice from your boss or from someone else who might have more experience, and basically just solve the problem like that. So being spontaneous is really important, because if you're a leader especially, you want to be able to come up with solutions quickly, but also effective solutions that are going to work well and that are going to actually solve the problems at hand. So I've listed here just that sports are a great way to become spontaneous, because I feel that when you're playing sports, you're completely in the moment, and you can't really be, taking time to make choices, and you need to really learn how to make up your mind quickly. And for that reason, I think sports is a great kind of mental training to become more spontaneous. So another form of problem solving is to solve your future problems. And planning for the future is another form of critical thinking, because you need to think critically about how to manage your money and how to spend your time, and basically just what is going to benefit you in the long run, and what are you going to tomorrow, what are you going to look back at your past self and be grateful that you did. So that's another kind of problem solving, and I've included it here because it's kind of the opposite of being spontaneous, but they're both types of critical thinking. And another thing is to step outside of your comfort zone. So this includes basically challenging yourself, saying like, if there's a new instrument or a new language that you want to learn, a great way to think critically is to basically try to do it. Try to challenge yourself and set a goal. And of course, you need to come up with a plan to reach that goal. So this is just another way of critical thinking to solve a problem that you might have. For example, if you have social anxiety and you know this, so the solution to social anxiety would be to expose yourself to a situation that makes you anxious, and basically just to realize when you're there, hey, everything is okay. And you really need to push yourself into these types of situations if you want to grow as a person. And so I feel that this falls under the category of critical thinking, to solve problems, complex problems at that, in the present moment that you might have in your own life. And then another thing is just analysis of facts to form a judgment. This would be under the second category. So the first was problem solving all these different types of problems. And then now we're getting into the second category, which is analysis of facts to form a judgment. So especially nowadays, we're constantly being flooded with information online or from our friends or family. And it's our responsibility to be able to filter this information. And basically, if there's something that you're hearing and you aren't completely sure what the source of this information is, you don't know how credible the source of this information is, it's important to be able to think critically and to question it. Because you don't want to just be believing everything that you read online or that you're told. You would rather, hopefully much rather, be able to do your own research and basically to come up with your own reasoning behind things, and basically think for yourself. Don't just be a product of influence, but take in the information and just do your research and form your own opinion from these things. So analyzing information is very important. A healthy dose of skepticism. So, as I said before, you don't want to just immediately buy into everything that you hear. It's good to be a little skeptical about things. And this triggers curiosity, and it might make you, want to do your research. And this is really, really important, especially nowadays, because you just don't want to just fall for everything that you hear. It's a very slippery slope, and so I feel that as people we need to be careful. And I think that this is a way that critical thinking influences our everyday lives. As important as those other two things, you want to keep an open mind, because keeping an open mind is so important. You don't want to allow yourself to have any biased opinions from past experiences, or just being influenced by others' opinions. Or sometimes we think that we just might know exactly how something is, but in reality, it's a really important skill to just always just keep like a humble understanding of everything, and just to know that, chances are I have more to learn in anything, really. And so never let your ego get the most of you, and basically just always keep that desire to learn, and just keep a humble understanding, and always be willing to step into another perspective other than your own, to take a look at a situation. And this is a really important part of critical thinking. Another thing is asking the right questions. So this would be the third category of critical thinking. And this is really important because a lot of the time in our school systems nowadays, we ask a lot of what questions, so what is the answer to this problem? What causes global warming? Or do you know what global warming is? These types of questions. And these are the types of questions that students can answer, and immediately, you're either right or you're wrong. But it's more important, I think, to ask less what questions and more how and why questions. So, for example, how does global warming affect the world? And better yet, why should we attempt to change global warming's effect on the world? So these types of questions, I feel, really get the gears in your brain moving, if you will, and they force you to think critically in a way that just simply answering in a black and white answer is just not as, it doesn't engage the same mental muscle as coming up with a solution that could be debatable. You might not necessarily be right or wrong, but a lot of these types of questions, these why questions, have just solutions that can be interpreted by different people in different ways. So I've also included here a couple other useful tips, but these are more just kind of physiological ways that critical thinking can affect us in a positive way. And the first one is metacognition, which is basically just thinking about your thinking, or thinking about how you learn. So it's consciously observing your mind and picking and choosing the thoughts that are beneficial and constructive to you as a person, and also recognizing the thoughts that are not so useful and that you might just want to just let go and do away with. So actually, metacognition is a really useful skill, because if you've ever tried teaching something to someone, teaching something that you yourself are still trying to learn, you might notice that by teaching it to someone else, it kind of solidifies it in your mind, and you get a better understanding of whatever this task or this ability might be. Because this is a form of metacognition, and just the sheer act of basically running through the steps in your mind, and by thinking of the processes and thinking of how you know these things, metacognition actually creates neural pathways in your brain to solidify the knowledge you might have. And then epigenetics. Epigenetics kind of ties in with a point that I made earlier in the video, where I mentioned you want to step outside of your comfort zone, and you want to expose yourself to situations that might make you a little uncomfortable so that you can grow. Well, epigenetics is basically just how our environment affects our DNA. So in our DNA, there is parts of our DNA that will not be activated unless you are engaged in a certain kind of situation. So basically, you're unlocking a part of yourself by putting yourself in a situation that might be uncomfortable. Because, for example, somebody who is afraid of public speaking and never speaks publicly, you just never know what potential you might have. But let's just say that you do expose yourself to public speaking, you might find that it engages you in a certain way that nothing else has before, and you might even find that you learn to love it and you become a great public speaker. So epigenetics is another important way of critical thinking. And so that's going to do it for my presentation today. These are the main 3 topics of critical thinking that I discussed today: problem solving, analyzing facts and information, and asking the right questions. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and thank you for watching.